The phone screen burned in my palm like a hot coal. 3 times I read the message thread, willing the words to rearrange themselves into something less damning. They didn't. I'm Laura, and until 5 minutes ago, I thought I knew my husband. Mom, is the pasta ready? Grace called from the living room, her voice cutting through the white noise in my head. Almost, sweetie. My voice didn't shake. Mothers learn to lie smoothly when protecting their children. The texts between Eric and his mother glowed accusingly on his forgotten phone. He'd left it on the kitchen counter while showering, something he never did. Always so careful, my Eric, about his privacy. Now I knew why. The realtor says we can close by the end of the month. Laura doesn't need to know until it's done. Eric's message to Helen. Perfect, darling. She'll thank us later. That house has always been too much for her to handle anyway. Helen's response. Already moved half the money. She never checks the accounts. My fingers curled around the granite countertop, knuckles white. 10 years of marriage, and they were planning to sell our home from under me. The home where Grace took her first steps, where I'd planted roses that finally bloomed last spring. The shower upstairs stopped running. What's burning? Grace appeared in the doorway, nose wrinkled. The pasta? I yanked the pot off the burner, dumping scorched noodles into the sink. Steam rose between us like a veil. Sorry, honey. How about pizza tonight? Yes. She pumped her fist in the air. Can I order? I handed her the landline, watching her skip away. My 10-year-old daughter, who had no idea her father was systematically dismantling our lives. Eric's footsteps creaked overhead. I placed his phone exactly where I'd found it, but not before forwarding the entire conversation to myself. My hands moved with surgical precision, muscle memory from years of marketing presentations kicking in. Stay calm, plan, execute. Something smells burnt. Eric appeared in the kitchen, hair damp, wearing the smile that used to make my heart skip. Now it made my stomach turn. Pasta disaster. We're getting pizza. He came closer, wrapped his arms around my waist. You seem tense. I leaned into him, bile rising in my throat. Long day. Poor baby. His lips brushed my neck. Maybe we should take that vacation we talked about. Get away for a while. Get me away, he meant, while Helen supervised the sale. Actually, I turned in his arms, met his eyes. I was thinking about your mother's suggestion to redo the living room. Maybe we should look at some paint samples this weekend. His smile flickered just for a moment. Let's not start any big projects right now, honey. Work's been crazy. Of course. I kissed his cheek, tasting betrayal. Whatever you think is best. The doorbell rang, pizza arriving with impeccable timing. Grace's footsteps thundered down the stairs. I'll get plates, Eric said, releasing me. I watched him move through our kitchen, this man I'd trusted with everything. He pulled down 3 plates from the cabinet, humming under his breath. Such a perfect performance. How long had he been rehearsing? My phone vibrated in my pocket. The forwarded messages arriving like ammunition. 10 years, 2 miscarriages, and countless compromises had led to this moment. Eric had always said I was too emotional, too dramatic. Helen agreed I needed a firmer hand. Well, they were about to learn just how dramatic I could be. Mom, Dad, pizza's getting cold. I grabbed the plates from Eric's hands, letting our fingers brush. He smiled down at me, confident in his control. Coming, sweetie, I called back, leading the way to our dining room, where family photos watched from every wall. Soon, they'd be all that remained of the life Eric thought he could erase with a few text messages. But first, I had some calls to make, starting with David Harper, Eric's boss, who'd been dropping hints about accounting irregularities for months. The game wasn't over. It was just beginning. The doorbell chimed at exactly 2 o'clock Sunday afternoon. Helen's trademark punctuality, another weapon in her arsenal of perfect manners and poisoned smiles. Grandma! Grace flew past me to the door. I watched Helen sweep in, designer handbag swinging, arms open for her granddaughter. Her eyes found mine over Grace's head, sharp as needles. Laura, darling, you look tired. 3 days had passed since I discovered the texts. 3 days of playing normal while documenting every suspicious transaction in our joint accounts. The latest discovery, $50,000, transferred to an account I couldn't access. Just busy with the garden. I gestured to my dirt-stained jeans. The roses need pruning. Oh? Helen's perfectly plucked eyebrows arched. I thought Eric mentioned you were thinking of hiring a landscaper. He hadn't. Another piece of their plan, slowly revealing itself. Did he? I kept my voice light. Must have slipped my mind. Coffee? Please. She settled at the kitchen island, Grace already showing her a new drawing. Eric's working today? Client meeting. The lie slipped out easily. He was actually viewing houses with their realtor, information courtesy of his calendar, which I'd finally gained access to yesterday. I set Helen's coffee down, black with 1 sugar. 10 years of serving it exactly how she liked it, like a good daughter-in-law. Grace, sweetheart, Helen's voice dripped honey. Why don't you go practice piano? I heard you have a recital coming up. But listen to your grandmother, Grace. The words tasted like ash. Once Grace's reluctant footsteps faded upstairs, Helen's smile thinned. We need to talk about Eric's concerns. Do we? He's worried about you, Laura. These mood swings, the obsession with the house. She sipped her coffee. Have you considered seeing someone? The gaslighting was almost artistic in its subtlety. I'd spent years doubting myself under their tag team manipulation. Actually, I pulled out my phone. I've been meaning to ask about this text thread. The color drained from Helen's face as I held up the screenshot. For 3 glorious seconds, her mask slipped. Then she laughed. Oh, darling, you've been snooping through Eric's phone? That's exactly what I mean about these paranoid behaviors. Paranoid? I zoomed in on the messages. Like planning to sell my home without my knowledge? Or stealing my money? Your money? Her voice could freeze hell. Everything you have is because of Eric. He's trying to protect you from yourself. Piano notes drifted down from upstairs, Grace practicing her recital piece. The same measure over and over, getting it perfect. You know what's interesting, Helen? I leaned forward. I spoke with David Harper yesterday. Apparently, there are some irregularities in Eric's department accounts. Her hand tightened on the coffee cup. David Harper should mind his own business. He is. The company's money is his business, just like my home is mine. You ungrateful little... She caught herself, smoothing her expression. Laura, you're clearly not well. Eric and I have only your best interests at heart. Like when you convinced him I was too unstable to work, or when you suggested Grace would be better off living with you. The piano music stopped abruptly. Helen's smile returned, razor sharp. Grace, come down, darling. Grandma's taking you for ice cream. You can't just watch me. She stood, gathering her bag. Eric warned me you might become difficult. Don't worry. We'll take good care of Grace while you sort yourself out. Footsteps thundered down the stairs. Grace appeared, beaming. Ice cream? I caught Helen's arm as she passed. This isn't over. Oh, Laura. She patted my hand like I was a child. It never began. Grace, say goodbye to your mother. I watched them leave. Helen's victory marched to her Mercedes. Through the window, I saw her pull out her phone, undoubtedly calling Eric. My own phone buzzed. A text from David. Found something. Meet tomorrow. I typed back one word. Yes. The house felt enormous suddenly, empty of Grace's presence. I walked to the kitchen, past the family photos Helen had helped arrange so perfectly over the years, each one a carefully curated lie. Time to start my own curation. I opened my laptop and began composing an email to our family lawyer. The roses could wait. I had other things to prune. The coffee shop bustled with morning traffic, but David's expression cut through the chaos like a knife. He slid a manila folder across the table, his fingers lingering on its edge. "It's worse than we thought, Laura." Inside were bank statements, transaction records, and emails. A paper trail of betrayal that made my stomach turn. Not just our joint accounts. Eric had been embezzling from the company for months, filtering money through shell accounts. $2 million. David's voice dropped lower, all traced back to properties purchased in Helen's name. My coffee went cold, untouched. He's been planning this for years. The pattern suggests at least 3 years of systematic fraud. David leaned forward. "Laura, this isn't just about your house anymore. This is criminal." A barista dropped a mug nearby, the crash making me flinch. 3 years. While I was recovering from my second miscarriage, while I was supporting his career moves, while I was raising our daughter, Eric had been orchestrating my erasure. My phone buzzed. "Helen, Grace isn't feeling well, keeping her home from school today." My hands started shaking. "They have my daughter." David read the message over my shoulder, his jaw tightening. "They can't just—" "They can. They will." I showed him yesterday's texts. "Helen's laying groundwork, making me look unstable. If I fight back, they'll use Grace as leverage." The morning crowd thinned, leaving us in a bubble of quiet desperation. David pulled out another document. "There's something else. The house Eric's been viewing, it's not just any property." He pushed a listing across the table. "It's a compound in Helen's neighborhood. High security, private access." The implications hit like a physical blow. They weren't just planning to take my home. They were building a fortress to keep me out. My phone buzzed again. "Eric, we need to talk. Dinner tonight, just us." "He knows." I looked up at David. "Somehow, he knows we're meeting." "Impossible. Unless—" David's expression darkened. Someone in accounting must have noticed my inquiries. The coffee shop's warmth turned suffocating. I stood abruptly, needing air. David followed me outside, where morning traffic roared past. "Laura, listen to me. You can't go home. If Eric suspects, I have to." My voice sounded strange, distant. "Grace is with them. I can't—" "Then let me help. I can call in some favors, get a court order." "No." The word came out sharp, certain. "The moment we make this official, they'll disappear with my daughter." Helen's been waiting for an excuse. A sleek Mercedes crawled past, the same model as Helen's. My heart stuttered until I confirmed it wasn't her. "I'll go to dinner." The plan formed as I spoke. Play along. Let Eric think he's in control while I gather what I need. It's dangerous. So is doing nothing. I turned to face him. "David, why are you helping me? Really?" His pause lasted a heartbeat too long. "Because 3 years ago, my sister disappeared with her kids. Her husband had been planning it for months. By the time we figured it out, understanding clicked. You never found them." "No." His hands clenched. "But this time, we have a chance to stop it before—" My phone erupted with Grace's ringtone. My daughter's voice came through small and confused. "Mom, Grandma says I'm staying here tonight. She says you're not feeling well." Behind her, I heard Helen's murmured instructions. "It's okay, sweetheart." My voice remained steady while my free hand gripped David's arm. "Just for tonight. I love you." "Love you too, Mom." The call ended. Helen's victory move played perfectly. "I have 24 hours. I released David's arm. "After that, they'll have everything in place." "Laura, send me copies of everything." I was already walking toward my car. And David, thank you for not telling me it would be okay. His reflection watched from the coffee shop window as I drove away. In my rearview mirror, I caught a glimpse of my face, set, determined, unfamiliar. Eric wanted dinner? Fine. I'd give him a last supper he'd never forget. First, though, I had a stop to make. The safety deposit box I'd opened last week waited, ready for the evidence that would destroy everything Helen had built. Let them think they were winning. The best revenge, after all, requires patience. The restaurant Eric chose was expensive enough to ensure polite behavior from its patrons. No scenes allowed in a place where the wine list read like a car payment. He was already seated when I arrived, his favorite power move. You look lovely. I'd chosen this dress carefully, the blue one from our anniversary dinner last year. His eyes softened at the sight of it, exactly as planned. How's Grace? I slid into my seat, noting the scotch in his hand. Third one, by his loosened tie. Missing her mother, he signaled the waiter. Helen says she cried herself to sleep. The knife twisted. I forced my hands to remain steady as I opened the menu. Interesting choice, taking her there without discussing it with me. Laura. His voice carried that familiar note of patronizing concern. We both know you haven't been yourself lately. The waiter appeared. Eric ordered for both of us, another power move I'd once found charming. You're right, I met his gaze. I haven't been myself. I've been someone else entirely, someone who checks bank statements. His hand tightened on the scotch glass. You've been snooping. $2 million, Eric. That's quite a nest egg. Keep your voice down. He leaned forward, mask slipping. Whatever David Harper told you is documented. I pulled out my phone, showed him the screenshots. Every transfer, every shell company, every property purchase in your mother's name. Color drained from his face. You don't understand? Oh, but I do. The house viewings, Grace's sudden sleepover, Helen's convenient concerns about my mental health. I took a sip of water. You're planning to disappear with our daughter. The waiter returned with our appetizers. We sat in silence until he left. It's not like that. Eric's voice dropped lower. I'm protecting our family. The company's failing. I had to secure our future. Our future? I laughed softly. Or yours and Helen's. His expression hardened. You're hysterical. This is exactly why. Why what? Why you need to control everything. Why Helen gets to raise my daughter. Stop. He grabbed my wrist across the table. Just stop. You have no idea what you're dealing with. A couple at the next table glanced over. Eric released me, straightening his tie. Actually, I pulled up another email on my phone. I do. Your mother's property holdings are quite impressive for someone who's never worked a day in her life, especially that compound she's building. How did you remember when you taught me about offshore accounts? During that vacation in the Caymans? I smiled. I was paying attention. The food arrived, perfectly plated and utterly ignored. What do you want? His voice was barely audible. Grace, home by tomorrow morning. No more sleepovers, no more surprise visits from Helen. Or what? Or David gets these documents first thing tomorrow. I wonder how the board will react to learning their CFO's been embezzling. Eric's laugh was ugly. You destroy everything, our life, Grace's security. You already did that. I stood, dropping my napkin on the untouched food. 9 a.m., Eric. Bring our daughter home. Laura. He caught my arm as I passed. If you do this, there are things you don't know. People who what? Who'll help you hide my daughter? I leaned down, whispered in his ear. I learned from the best, darling. I've got copies everywhere. I was halfway to the door when his voice carried across the restaurant. She'll never forgive you. I didn't turn around, let him think he'd scored a hit. In my car, I finally allowed my hands to shake. One text to David. It's done. Start the audit tomorrow. His reply came instantly. Be careful. Eric's not alone in this. I started the engine, checking my rearview mirror. A black SUV pulled out behind me. Helen's new driver, no doubt. They weren't even trying to be subtle anymore. Fine, let them follow. They'd be too busy watching me to notice what I'd set in motion at the bank this morning, transferring everything I could access to accounts they'd never find. Tomorrow at 9, I'd either have my daughter back or I'd burn their whole world down trying. The game was changing. Time to show them exactly who they'd underestimated. 9 a.m. came and went. No grace, no calls, just silence and a house that felt like a tomb. By noon, my calls went straight to voicemail, Eric's, Helen's, even Grace's emergency phone. The black SUV still idled down the street, its tinted windows revealing nothing. David's text flashed on my screen. Board meeting in progress. Eric's not here. My hands wouldn't stop shaking as I packed Grace's favorite stuffed rabbit into my bag. They'd planned this, the dinner, the confrontation, all of it a distraction while they... The front door clicked open. Eric stood in the entryway, alone. His suit was wrinkled, his eyes bloodshot. We need to talk. Where is she? Safe. He closed the door behind him, which is more than I can say for you if you don't back off. Back off? I advanced on him. You kidnapped our daughter. Kidnapped? He laughed, an ugly sound. I'm her father. Helen's her grandmother. We're protecting her from your instability. By stealing her away? By emptying our accounts? The money's gone, Laura. His voice dropped. All of it. The offshore accounts, the properties. Someone cleaned everything out this morning, including the company funds. My stomach lurched. This wasn't part of the plan. What are you talking about? Don't play innocent. He grabbed my arm. Your little audit threat? It triggered something bigger. There are people involved who make Helen look like a kindergarten teacher. The pieces clicked. Eric hadn't been embezzling alone. Where's Grace? My voice cracked. Tell me where you hid the money, and maybe... I wrenched away from him. I didn't take anything except what was mine. His phone buzzed. The color drained from his face as he read the message. They're coming. He grabbed my shoulders. Laura, for once in your life, listen to me. Give it back, all of it. Or they'll... The front window exploded. Eric shoved me down as glass rained around us. Through the ringing in my ears, I heard car doors slamming outside. Run! Eric pushed me toward the kitchen. Back door, now! Heavy footsteps crunched on glass behind us. I scrambled up, but Eric caught my arm again. The evidence, he hissed. Where is it? A voice called out. Mr. Bennett, we need to discuss some financial discrepancies. I yanked free, sprinting for the kitchen. Eric's curse followed me as more glass shattered. The back door stuck. Helen's latest home improvement, no doubt. I slammed my shoulder against it once, twice. It burst open just as shouting erupted from the living room. I didn't look back, just ran across the yard, vaulting the fence like I used to in high school track. My phone buzzed as I reached the neighbor's driveway. David, Laura, don't go home. Eric's partners. Too late for that warning. A black sedan idled at the curb, driver's door open. David leaned out. Get in. I dove into the passenger seat as engines roared behind us. David floored it, tires screaming. Grace, I gasped. Still at Helen's compound. He took a corner hard. But we've got bigger problems. The money Eric stole, it belonged to... I don't care who it belonged to. I pulled out my phone, hands steadier now. Helen's compound has a security weakness. The architect owed me a favor from my marketing days. Laura, they took my daughter, David. I pulled up the compound's blueprints. Everything else is just details. He glanced in the rearview mirror. Two black SUVs gained on us. "We'll need help," he said. "Already arranged." I showed him the text from my lawyer, the one Eric didn't know about. "But first, we need to lose our tail." David's grip tightened on the wheel. "You know this makes you as bad as them." "No." I watched the SUVs in the side mirror. They took what wasn't theirs. I'm taking back what is. The car accelerated, and I felt something shift inside me. The last traces of the woman Eric had tried to control burning away. They wanted to play hardball? Fine. Game on. David's safe house turned out to be a motel room that smelled of stale cigarettes and broken dreams. I sat on the edge of the bed, staring at Grace's stuffed rabbit while police scanner chatter filled the silence. "They've stopped searching this area." David pulled back the curtain an inch. "For now." My phone buzzed. Another text from Helen. "Grace keeps asking for you. Don't make this harder than it needs to be." Attached was a photo of my daughter, tear-stained face pressed against Helen's living room window. My hands started shaking again. "She's baiting you." David moved away from the window. "Helen knows exactly what she's doing." "It's working." I clutched the rabbit tighter. "Every minute I sit here, they're poisoning Grace against me." "Better than getting you killed." He sat beside me, careful to maintain distance. "The people Eric's involved with, they don't play games." "And I do?" The laugh that escaped sounded foreign, even to me. "I just lost my daughter, my home, and apparently triggered some sort of criminal conspiracy. Tell me again how I'm playing games." My phone lit up again, unknown number this time. "The money, midnight, or we start asking your daughter about Mommy's accident." The room tilted sideways. "I never took their money." "No." David's voice was gentle. "But someone did, right after the audit announcement. They think it was you." "How much?" "20 million." The number hung in the air like smoke. Through the thin walls, I heard a couple arguing, their words muffled but their anger clear. "We could go to the police," David suggested. "With what? Evidence that my husband's been embezzling? That his mother kidnapped our daughter?" I stood, pacing the cramped room. "They've got Grace. Everything else is just numbers on paper." "Laura!" A sharp knock at the door cut him off. We froze. David reached for his phone, but before he could dial, a familiar voice called out, "Room service." My blood ran cold. "Eric." David moved toward the bathroom window, but I caught his arm. "Wait." "Laura, don't." I opened the door. Eric stood there, alone, looking worse than I'd ever seen him. Blood stained his collar, and his left eye was swelling shut. "5 minutes," he said. "That's all I've got before they realize I slipped their tail." I let him in, keeping David between us. "They took Helen." Eric's voice cracked. "Right after you ran. Said they'd start with her fingers if the money doesn't turn up." "And Grace?" "Safe, for now. They're watching the compound, but they won't touch her while there's a chance." He trailed off, swaying slightly. David steadied him. "Chance of what?" "Of Laura cooperating." Eric met my eyes. "They think you planned this. The audit, the missing money. It's too perfect." "I didn't." "I know." He laughed bitterly. "You're good, but not that good. This was someone else, someone who knew exactly when to strike." The pieces clicked. "Someone like your boss?" David went very still. "The board meeting this morning." Eric's good eye narrowed. "Everyone was there except David." I stepped back, remembering his perfectly timed rescue. "Who just happened to be driving by our house when everything went down?" "Laura, listen," David started. 20 million. The number felt different now. "That's a lot of money to risk for someone you barely know." "I told you about my sister." "Did you?" My back hit the wall. Or was that just another story? Eric moved faster than I thought possible in his condition, putting himself between me and David. "The money's gone," David said quietly. "Transferred through so many shells it'll take years to trace. But I can get Grace back. That was always the plan." "The plan?" My voice shook. "Using my daughter as collateral?" "Using their greed." He pulled out his phone. "Check your account." I did. The number made me dizzy. 1 million, David said. "Consider it consultation fees. Now we all have something to lose." The couple next door had stopped arguing. The silence felt like a noose. "Midnight," David continued. "That's when they're expecting the money. The question is, who's going to show up to collect?" Eric's phone buzzed. The color drained from his face as he read the message. "Time's up," he whispered. "They found Helen." The company gala sparkled with fake smiles and champagne bubbles. I adjusted my evening gown, borrowed from the same lawyer who'd helped me set this trap, and watched Eric work the room from my position near the emergency exit. "He's nervous," David's voice crackled through my earpiece. "Third drink in 20 minutes. And Helen?" "Still at the compound with Grace. My people are in position. My people." The words twisted in my stomach like broken glass. I touched the USB drive hanging from my neck, disguised as costume jewelry. 20 million reasons for everyone in this room to want me dead. Eric spotted me across the dance floor. His step faltered. "Showtime," I murmured, raising my champagne in a mock toast. He reached me in seconds, grip painful on my arm. "Are you insane? They're here." "I know." I smiled for the benefit of watching eyes. In fact, I counted on it. The band struck up a waltz. Eric pulled me onto the dance floor, his movements rigid with fury and fear. "Where's the money, Laura?" "Funny." I let him lead, our steps a perfect facade. "That's exactly what your friends asked Helen, right before they started with her fingers." His rhythm stumbled. "You've destroyed everything." "No, Eric, you did that." I nodded toward the stage where David stood, preparing to give his keynote speech. "But I'm about to finish it." The lights dimmed. David approached the microphone, carrying a familiar laptop. Eric's face went ash white. "That's your mother's computer? Amazing what people leave unlocked when they're being tortured." The first spreadsheet appeared on the giant screen behind David. Transaction records, offshore accounts, shell companies, Helen's meticulous documentation of every crime. "Ladies and gentlemen," David began, "I'm afraid this evening's agenda has changed." Eric's hand tightened on my waist. "I'll kill you." "No." I met his eyes. "You'll watch." The room erupted in murmurs as more documents appeared. Board members leaned forward, recognition dawning on their faces. In the back, men in dark suits started moving through the crowd. "The money's gone?" Eric hissed. "This changes nothing. Check your phone." He did, confusion turning to horror as notifications flooded in. Every account emptied, every property transferred, Helen's entire empire dismantled with a few keystrokes. Impossible. I learned from the best. I stepped back as security approached. "You and Helen taught me so well. About control, about patience." David's voice carried over the chaos. "Federal agents are here to discuss these discrepancies." Eric lunged for me, but hands grabbed him from behind. As agents led him away, his desperate shout cut through the music. "Grace needs her father." "No." I watched him struggle. "She needs the truth." My phone buzzed, a message from Helen's compound. "Package secured, girl safe." The room spun with activity. Agents, accusations, arrests. David caught my eye from the stage, a question in his expression. I touched my earpiece. "It's done. Helen's in custody. Grace is asking for you." Relief made my knees weak. I started for the exit, but David's voice stopped me. Laura, wait! He jumped down from the stage. There's something you should know. A gunshot cracked through the air. David stumbled, red blooming across his white shirt. Behind him, Helen stood in the doorway, her designer dress torn, fingers bloody, holding a security guard's weapon. You ungrateful bitch, she snarled at me. Everything I built. I moved without thinking, tackling her as another shot went wild. We crashed into a table, glass shattering around us. The gun skittered across the floor. Helen's manicured nails raked my face. He was never good enough for you. This was never about Eric. I pinned her arms. This was about power, your power. I made him strong. You made him weak. I leaned close, tasting blood. And now Grace will never know your kind of love. Security swarmed us as Helen screamed, not in rage, but in despair, the sound of everything she'd built crumbling to ash. Through the chaos, I caught a glimpse of David being helped up, the bullet having only grazed him. Our eyes met across the room. The truth hung between us, unspoken but clear. Some victories cost more than revenge. I touched my earpiece one last time. Take me to my daughter. Grace's stuffed rabbit sat on the courthouse bench between us, its worn fur catching the morning light. My daughter hadn't spoken since we entered the building, her small hand gripping mine with desperate strength. Through the heavy doors, I could hear Eric's sentencing proceeding. The words filtered out in fragments. Embezzlement, conspiracy, criminal enterprise. Mom? Grace's voice was barely a whisper. Is Grandma really going away forever? The question hit like a physical blow. Helen's trial had ended yesterday. 15 years, no possibility of parole. The papers called it justice. Grace called it losing her grandmother. Not forever, sweetheart. I smoothed her hair. But for a long time. She nodded, processing this with the strange wisdom of children. Because she hurt people? Yes. Did she hurt you? Before I could answer, the courtroom doors opened. Eric emerged between two officers, handcuffed but still wearing his expensive suit like armor. Our eyes met over Grace's head. For a moment, I saw him as he'd been 10 years ago, charming, ambitious, full of promises. Then Grace stiffened beside me, and the illusion shattered. Daddy? Her voice cracked. Eric stopped, officers tensing beside him. Hey, Princess, his smile wavered. Taking care of your mother? Grace's grip on my hand tightened. She said nothing. Time to go, one officer murmured. As they led him away, Eric called back, Laura, the house. Helen told me what really happened that night. Why she made me. Goodbye, Eric. He flinched at the finality in my voice. The officers guided him around the corner, and he was gone. David appeared from the courtroom, his arm still in a sling. 20 years, he said quietly, plus restitution. The money? Most of it's been recovered. Your shares already transferred. Grace picked up her rabbit, hugging it close. Can we go home now? Home? Not the house Eric and Helen had tried to steal, nor the compound they'd planned to hide her in. Our new home, the apartment overlooking the park, where no one could control our view. Actually, David knelt to Grace's level. I was thinking ice cream first, if that's okay with your mom? Grace looked up at me, question in her eyes. I nodded. Only if I can get 2 scoops, she declared, a flash of her old spirit returning. Deal. David stood, wincing slightly. I'll bring the car around. As he walked away, Grace tugged my hand. Mom, is Mr. David going to be like Daddy? The question stopped my breath. In the weeks since the gala, David had been careful, respectful, everything Eric had once pretended to be. But Grace's fear cut straight to the heart of it all. No, sweetie, I knelt beside her. And you know what? If he ever tried, we'd leave. Just you and me, no matter what. Promise? Promise. She considered this, then nodded solemnly. Good, because I like him better when he's just David. A laugh escaped me, the first real one in what felt like years. Outside, David waited with the car. As Grace climbed in, I caught a glimpse of my reflection in the window. Someone stronger, someone who'd learned the difference between revenge and justice. My phone buzzed. A text from Helen's number, sent by her lawyer. She wants to see you. I deleted it without responding. Some doors needed to stay closed. Ready? David asked as I got in. Through the windshield, I watched the courthouse shrink in the mirror. The place where Eric and Helen's carefully constructed world had finally crumbled. They'd taught me about control, about power, about the price of trust. But Grace had taught me something more important: how to let go. Yes, I said, reaching back to hold my daughter's hand. We're ready. The car pulled away from the curb, carrying us toward ice cream, toward healing, toward whatever came next. Not an ending. Grace's stuffed rabbit still needed washing, David's arm needed time to heal, and tomorrow would bring its own challenges. But for now, we had this moment, and for the first time in years, every choice ahead was ours to make.